This podcast contains serious content served with a dollop of humor.
Play, think, listen, learn. Play,
The
think,
plan you're
listen,
looking for is here.
listen, learn. Play,
One moment. Let me get my
listen,
phone set.
play,
I'm feeling
listen,
good.
play,
Hi,
listen,
we're here and we're a little
play,
weird.
think,
Can
listen,
I just say how
learn,
happy that
play,
makes my heart?
Think, listen, learn.
See, when I hear this question and about how they see themselves, my oldest is 13, right? So I have the gap of 7 to 13. That's where my home life dwells around. And there's a lot of research that's starting to come out with like the filters, right? Everybody can put this little filter and now you don't have a blemish on your face and you've got little twinkly sparkles around your face. But if that's all children are seeing online is these perfectly shaped chins and these like non-blemished faces and the sparkle crowns, especially our young children that don't understand necessarily the difference between fantasy and reality, that's going to make them be like, well, if I don't have this like perfectly, shaped chin and this like little shiny spot on my nose and whatever the sparkle crown, that's not perfect. Well, nobody really looks like that. Like when you see people and they post pictures with filters all over whatever social media, and then you see them in real life, you're like, you don't look the same. And that's the point of the filters. But the problem is the social emotional damage that causes. And like the representation of, I'm only pretty if I have this flawless skin and this like perfectly shaped everything and eyes that are 3 times bigger. Like nobody's face looks like that in reality. Those are like cartoony and but little kids, they don't know the difference. So they're going to look at that and say, I'm not good enough. I'm not whatever this positive word. They're not going to associate themselves with that because they don't see themselves like that in the mirror. They only see themselves like that when they're turning on the filters on people's phones, for the video calls or to take the pictures. And so that's where my concern is that there's a social emotional piece that's going to be real damaging when nobody looks like that. You're going to have these, children that are 10 to 13 that are asking for plastic surgery because they don't look right. And what they think right is a filtered, digitally remastered face.
I think it's definitely getting better in terms of just having cartoon characters of color. And even taking it further, a lot of times it was just recoloring the white character to have darker skin. But over time, we're actually seeing features and like hairstyles actually represent real people. We definitely still have a long ways to go. And I was looking at something last week for a training where it talked about, how many in children's books. And a couple of years ago, like 50% of the representation in children's books were characters that were like primary characters that were white. And like Native American, Indigenous was like 2%, and animals was like 25, something like that percent. But it took adding up all the people of color, the Black, Indigenous, people of color, and the animals as the primary characters to equal white characters, like white leading characters. And I'm curious what it is actually for like our cartoons and images on TV. I remember growing up, there were very few cartoons characters, very few, either the whole cartoon or cartoon characters that were African-American, Black, let alone people, just generally people of color, and in a positive, non-stereotypical way. I also can remember some cartoons that watching, and I think about them now that, we would be horrified to see today, depictions of Native Americans in a very stereotypical way. And that's what was available on TV.
Yeah.
There wasn't anything else. And so it's getting better, but I know we have a long way to go.
Yeah.
But I am kind of curious, like the representations, like how it equates with the, the book study with cartoon characters. And
It's a really interesting question, Adrian. I wish we had an answer on the spot.
yeah.
No, we this is a weird game that the husband and I play. So we are like, oh, hey, let's be nostalgic and show our children cartoons from the 90s, like the things we grew up with. And the cartoon has like the one black male, and we have yet to find them. So if you have one, please, where he's not the athlete. It's like, hey, there's this cartoon mommy used to watch, or hey, there's this cartoon that, we loved. And then we watch it and it's like the one black male is always the athlete. And I'm like, oh my goodness. Yeah. So then we turn on another one and we're like, let me guess, he's the basketball player. And sure enough, he is. Oh, nope, he's not the basketball player. He's the football player. But I didn't realize that as a child in the 90s growing up. But now that I'm educated and an adult looking back, I'm like, they didn't have any other cartoon representation of black males on the TV shows that I was watching Saturday morning that weren't athletic. And it's like my peers, I think about the children I went to school with and grew up with. There are people I went to school, kindergarten through graduating high school, that were people of color. And I'm like, they only ever saw themselves in Saturday morning cartoons as a basketball player. And so that's kind of an odd thing we do, is like try to find this nostalgic cartoon that doesn't have stereotypical characters. And unfortunately, we have yet to find it. So, yeah.
Yeah, oddly enough, the other night we were watching TV, and it's not that we do very often, but we were watching a program that had commercials, which is the part of the fact that we don't do very often, is watch TV that has commercials. And I said to my husband that, watch it from a perspective of where the Black person is at and what role they play. And we picked out more roles of secondary, or the person being taught, person being talked to or down. It was like, my husband was like, wow, I didn't even think of that. And I'm like, yeah, it's just, I didn't realize how much of it was until I started looking at it as well. So
there have been more representations of mixed couples, though, on TV, which I'm happy to see, whether it's biracial and white black, or I've even seen like black and Asian and, white and Asian. And I'm like, okay, this is more real life, right? And so it's at least good to see that coming along.
Taking a while.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And yet, like there's recently, well, maybe not recently, maybe the last couple of years, there was an interracial family, and I think it's a Cheerios commercial. And whoever, like the maker of Cheerios, it just got tons and tons of backlash for showing a biracial child, tons of backlash. And it's still prevalent. But part of the question you asked, Mike, was about that that importance of representation.
Mm-hmm.
And I just started remembering, and with joy, of the shows that were around African American families, and things like Family Matters, and this is going to date me, but like 227 or the Jeffersons, and that showed Black families prospering, and
Fresh Prince
and being families, and that Everybody Loves Chris, and some of those shows I'm remembering now, and I love that, and it was seeing my family, seeing parts of me on TV, and how important, not realizing at the time, but how important those messages were for me to count as a child and teen growing up, to counter, all those were positive, even the Cosby Show, and showing kids going off to college, and that was an expectation that countered intentionally a lot of other messages and images about Black families that were very stereotypical, that were very negative, showing the athletes, showing crime, or, in a very stereotypical negative way. And I think right now I'm actually realizing how, I didn't know it then, but how important those were for me. And that continues for our kiddos today. And it continues for me as an adult. I get excited when I see a movie or a TV show that's coming out, and it is primarily focused on African-American Black characters, and it's positive.
Adrian, you said family matters. And I'm just gonna be really raw, and Chris, you can edit me out later if you need to. So family matters. I was probably my daughter's age when I watched the episode where the son, he gets pulled over by the police, and the police are not, they profile him, and they're very racist towards him. And the father of that show, if anybody hasn't watched it, is actually a police officer as well. And it was this whole episode about racial profiling and the discrepancies there. And as a child, I was like, police are the good guys. What do you mean? And so I'm watching this show, and for the first time, in a superficial way, because it is a TV show, but I got to see a whole different perspective. I was like, wait, you mean that the police don't treat everybody evenly? And because I was that little kid that asked why about everything, I went to my mom and I was like, Mom, why is that? And she was like, oh, well, she tried to play it off because the show is set in Chicago. Oh, maybe that's a big city thing. And then my dad, who has a very different perspective on life, was like, no, let me tell you some real stuff. And we sat down, and I had my first real race conversation. And I know it's so funny to say that it came from this TGIF, family night TV show, but it was the first time that I saw life from somebody else's perspective, and I had a glimpse of reality, and my little happy white privilege bubble was popped. So I'm thankful for those shows, because in such a funny little way, they taught me some things that I don't think I would have been exposed to as a child raised on a farm in Graham, Washington.
I love now that you can I don't have cable. So, I've been relying on Prime and Netflix, but also some of the other channels, and watching Good Times has been on. And I'm hoping to see that someone somewhere, What's Happening was, it was the 70s, but I love that show, now all these shows are coming around in my brain, and I'm just remembering them. And there's one with, Bernie Mac. That's the one.
Oh yeah.
The Bernie Mac show.
That was awesome. Fat Albert. This is a total trip down memory lane.
Yeah, I know. You see what you've started?
Yeah.
And it's a positive thing. But yeah. All right. Mike, do you want to run into the lightning round?
Sure. Catch your breath, folks, because we're going to be moving fast.
Well, let me find my question. Okay. Yeah. All right.
Do I have a question? No, I don't. Okay.
You're just
I got to
answering.
respond.
You just get to respond this time round. And now, welcome to our lightning round. The rules are simple. We field questions from you, our listeners, that we take turns answering. By the way, please send your questions to us, the Couch Coaching Quintet, at ccpodcast@childcare.org.
Can you say that again?
Sure. Please send your questions to us at letter C, CC podcast@childcare.org. We will take turns being the moderator. The moderator will read a question. Time is precious. Each of the other 4 couch coaches must answer in 15 seconds or less, and the entire answer period ends after 50 seconds. A rude noisemaker will be used to silence coaches who try to exceed the allotted time. Viv, what is our first question?
All right. Ready? Set. Do you know the difference between Bi-Fi, Li-Fi, Mi-Fi, Sci-Fi, and Wi-Fi? Or does it matter?
How do you even
Some of
answer
them,
this?
yes. Some of them, I have no clue. Does it matter? Depends on if it's illegal or something's going to blow up.
I think you made up half of those, Viv, but I know sci-fi. I've been to a convention all around that. So I got that on lock, but the other ones, maybe not.
I had to look up Bi-Fi, and I shared this with you earlier, and it looks like some of those things that you see rolling around on the little rollers at 7-Eleven, the Bi-Fi. I think it's like a corn dog without a stick or something like that. I think maybe Mike can elaborate on it.
I don't have enough time to. Let's just say that Bi-Fi, Mi-Fi, and Wi-Fi are all different ways of getting to the same end result, which is excellent tech coverage, right? And then Sci-Fi and Bi-Fi are kind of off to the side. That's all I know. It doesn't matter.
I'll believe you. Sounds good.
Okay. For our second lightning round, you will be serving up our question, Chris.
Okay, here we go. So it says, these days you can buy toy smartphones, but phones that resemble old-fashioned rotary dial units are also still being manufactured and sold. Why does anybody still buy them when in everyday life, kids are no more likely to encounter a rotary phone than a floppy disk or VHS tape?
Well, look, the kid in the heart, the heart of the kid. Oh,
All right.
the
A
kid
moment
in
of
me.
maximum clarity.
The kid in me. All right. The kid in me says, why not have the old fashioned phone, for God's sake? The only thing I know, really. You put it up to your face and you go, blah, 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 blah.
My kids, as little kids, they like doing the rotary phone. I just think because they liked watching it spin. I don't think there was obviously a connection. Like, this is how I would call Oma, but they were like, woo, spinny. And it just made fun noises. And then, yeah, the floppy disk, my child thought it was a 3D printing of the save icon. So there's that.
Oh, God.
That's a good question. Why do we still sell them? You know, especially like the toy ones.
Because I can relate with it. I can relate with it. See, I can.
Yeah.
Okay. You're getting old. You understand, girl?
Hey. Hey now. But it is kind of funny to see like kids like with the like phone booths, and they're like, what is that? Or how do I make a call? Like, where's
They
the
must
screen?
have been making a Superman movie here or something.
Right.
Yeah. It's like a stick shift in a car.
That's still relevant then. Okay. And now here is Marie with our third and final lightning round question.
20 years from now, what kind of technology will everybody be worried that kids are being exposed to way too much?
Radiation.
What?
Apparently my son forgot that I was not on mute. And he says,
Oh, but keep that in.
Yeah, I love that.
Avatars. We're all going to be spending most of our lives in simulations of reality instead of making any longer even a pretense of being connected to actual reality. And people will be worried that kids who are spending 8 to 10 hours a day with avatars are maybe losing out on their edge in life.
What's an avatar?
Hell if I know.
I know it's my question, but I was going to say like the Rosie, the whatever, the cleaning lady from the Jetsons. Like I could just be like it. I was a child of the 90s. So I just have this like AI taking over fear.
Yeah.
So I just think we're all going to have like okay, I'm not sponsored or anything, but on Netflix, there's a movie called The Mitchells versus the Machines. Y'all watch that because it's basically
pretty fun.
It's so funny. We watched it for family movie night, like not sponsored, whatever. Don't yell at me, YouTube. But we watch it and it's hilarious. Smartphones take over the world. So that's what I think. I think
It's
that
the
movie
PG
is
version of Terminator, right?
basically it is. It's Terminator, like in a cartoon form for babies. So, but that's what I think. I think Terminator, or like in a PG kid-friendly way, the Mitchells versus the Machines. In 20 years, the smartphones are going to control us.
I mean, we already have, there are already some companies are exploring like delivery by drones, or one of the pizza chains, like, you know, the driverless pizza delivery. You know, I saw something about college campuses, like delivery by robot or whatever. So I think it's the robot instead of a human being, even more so, and like that artificial intelligence kind of stuff.
Well, they're kind of stair-stepping us into it with a Roomba, right? So they're like, hey, let's start with this small thing that's going to clean your house.
Although I can
really
get behind,
clean anything.
I can get behind a Roomba. So
You just got to make sure you get the Roomba that actually has the vacuum, because I've seen a knockoff version that just rolls around, but it doesn't suck anything up.
Jeez.
and to make sure apparently that it doesn't go through dog poop.
Oh, Lord.
And, and it,
Right. Please edit that out.
and on that note, listeners, let's mercifully bring this lightning round to a conclusion. Our topic for our next podcast will be risky play.
Ooh.
If you have a question
Dun,
for
dun,
us
dun.
related to this topic of risky play,
Woo!
or any other topic for that matter, please send it to ccpodcast@childcare.org.
What did he say?
ccpodcast@childcare.org.
One more time, Mike. No.
Okay. ccpodcast@childcare.org. And thanks for listening. I'm Mike.
Oh, I'm Adrian.
I'm Marie.
Hey, I'm Viv.
And I'm Chris. See ya.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Couch Coaching. Bye.